Today, the world looks on in horror as the situation in the occupied Palestinian territories continues to deteriorate to the level not seen in recent history. Over 22 months into hostilities, Gaza is sinking deeper in disaster, marked by rapidly mounting civilian casualties, mass displacement, and now famine. The hostages held by Hamas and other Palestinian armed groups continue to languish in appalling conditions. Meanwhile, the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, is also facing an unprecedented crisis. Relentless expansion of settlements, demolitions, intensifying violence continue to undermine any prospect of peace. The choice could not be clearer: continue the current path of perpetual conflict, entrenching the occupation, or recommit to a political process that will solve the conflict, end the occupation, and realize a two-state solution. Mr. President, tragically, there is no end in sight to the conflict in Gaza. Despite a renewed push by the mediators to reach a ceasefire and hostage release deal, a breakthrough remains elusive. Israeli strikes have intensified throughout Gaza, hitting IDP tents, schools, hospitals, and residential buildings. The human toll of these hostilities has been staggering. Since 23rd July, at least 2,553 Palestinians were killed, according to the Ministry of Health in Gaza. Some 271 were reportedly killed while attempting to collect aid, including in the vicinity of militarized distribution sites. Palestinian armed groups also continue to target the IDF and sporadically launch rockets towards Israel. Journalists continue to be targeted, with over 240 journalists killed in Gaza since the conflict began. On August 10, an Israeli airstrike hit a tent used by journalists in Gaza City, killing 6 journalists. The IDF said they were targeting Al Jazeera correspondent Anas al-Sharif, who they said was the head of a Hamas cell. On 25th August, Israeli strikes on Nasser Hospital in Khan Younis killed at least 20 Palestinian civilians, including medical personnel and journalists. I reiterate the Secretary General call for an independent and impartial investigation into these killings. The UN and its partners are working tirelessly to assist the population, but the security risks are extremely high and the current mitigation measures are woefully inefficient. On my recent visit to Gaza, I was stunned at the scale of the destruction and suffering. I met humanitarian workers risking their lives to deliver aid while themselves living in intolerable conditions. I saw the immense personal toll on the population, including the UN's own staff, but was also inspired by our staff's unshakable commitment to do their work. As they speak today, they remain present and continue to deliver essential life-saving services throughout Gaza, including in the Gaza City. Mr. President, according to the Israeli sources, 50 hostages, including 1 woman, are still being held captive by Hamas and other Palestinian groups in Gaza. 28 of them are believed to be deceased. While visiting affected communities in Israel, I saw the shattered homes of Niroz, where 1 in 4 residents was either murdered or abducted on 7 October. I met survivors who carry unbearable loss and trauma. I acknowledge today's presence of Ilana Gridzewski, who will speak today about her experience as a survivor of Hamas captivity, and I pay tribute to her immense courage and fortitude. I have also met with the family members of other hostages held by Hamas, including Eviatar David, who briefed this council recently. In my meetings, I could see unimaginable pain in their eyes. I was also impressed by their remarkable strength. The videos released by Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad Depicting emaciated Israeli hostages are deeply disturbing. The ill treatment and abuse of hostages constitute a blatant violation of international law. Hostages must be treated with dignity and allowed to receive visits and assistance from International Committee of the Red Cross. Mr. President, unthinkably, Gaza's population is now facing yet another deadly escalation. On 8 August, the Israeli government announced its decision to take over Gaza City. The resulting military operation is ongoing and, as we speak, for the population already struggling to survive, the Palestinians in Gaza are now seeing their worst fear becoming reality in front of their eyes. Already, 86% of the Gaza Strip lies within Israeli military zones. Expanded military operations in Gaza City will have catastrophic consequences, including displacement of hundreds of thousands. I am deeply alarmed by the findings of the latest IPC analysis, confirming that famine is engulfing the Gaza governorate. Ending famine is a race against time. It will require a dramatic increase in the quantity and quality of food entering Gaza. It will also require restoring the basic systems, such as water and sanitation, health services, food production, all what is needed to sustain human life. My colleague, Assistant Secretary General Msuya, will cover the IPC findings in more detail in her briefing. Mr. President, recent steps by Israel, including the 27 July announcement of a daily pause in operations in specific areas in Western Gaza, and its approval on the 5th August of a mechanism for the controlled entry of commercial goods, have increased the supply of essential items to Gaza. Israeli authorities have also approved the entry of more diverse array of supplies, including animal feed materials starting this week. But let's be clear, these steps are nowhere near sufficient to address the vast scale of the needs. The lack of law and order also presents a significant obstacle to humanitarian operations. The unbearable conditions in Gaza have led to looting by desperate civilians, while looting by organized groups also continues to undermine relief efforts. It is imperative to restore the required condition for functional, community-based distribution systems to reach the most vulnerable. Israel's imposition of the new requirement on INGO registration is further constraining humanitarian response. With the deadline looming to meet the new requirements, many international non-government organizations operating in Gaza may be forced to cease their activities, leaving vulnerable communities without essential support. I urge the government to rescind the new registration requirement. All parties must allow rapid, safe, unimpeded, and large-scale delivery of humanitarian aid. Civilians, including humanitarian workers and those seeking aid, must be protected. Mr. President, for the sake of humanity, I urge all sides to put an end to this brutal war immediately. The only way to stop the immense and undescribable human suffering is through a full, immediate, and permanent ceasefire and the unconditional release of all hostages. Mr. President, the situation in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, continues to spiral dangerously downward. The territory envisaged for the future Palestinian state is shrinking, while a one-state reality of unlawful occupation and perpetual violence is rapidly advancing. During the reporting period, Israeli security forces continued operations in northern cities and refugee camps. More than 32,000 residents of three camps remain displaced as the result of these ongoing operations. They must be able to return to their homes and services, including those of UNRWA, which must be restored. In total, in the West Bank, 9 Palestinians, including 4 children, were killed by the Israeli security forces during the reporting period. Attacks by Israeli settlers have continued, often in the presence of Israeli forces, resulting in 3 Palestinians killed damage to Palestinian property, and displacement of Palestinians' families. Attacks by Palestinians against Israelis also continued, with no fatalities reported in the last month. On 28 July, Palestinian activist Auda Hathalin was shot and killed by a settler in Masafer Yatta, and his 5-year-old son Vatan stood by, witnesses his father's death. When visiting the family, I held Vatan in my arms and thought about enormous tragedy of his future life without a father and with his community facing the constant threat of violence and displacement. No child should face such horror. Perpetrators of settler violence must be held to account. Palestinians must be able to live safely on their land. Mr. President, since 7 October 2023, settlers' attacks have escalated in frequency and become more violent and deadly. These attacks have increasingly led to forced displacement. Frequently, settlers then move into areas that were fully displaced and establish outposts with the acquiescence of Israeli authorities. This leads to further settlement expansion and consolidation of Israeli control. Corresponding government decisions are fast-tracking settlement expansion, including in the most highly strategic areas. On 20th August, the Israeli High Planning Committee approved a plan on the construction of more than 3,400 housing units in the area EU1. If implemented, the move would effectively see a connection between the northern and southern West Bank. As such, it would undermine the possibility of a viable and contiguous Palestinian state. I urge Israel to immediately seize any steps towards construction in E1 area and recall that all establishment of settlements violates international law. Meanwhile, Israeli authorities continue to demolish Palestinian-owned structures, leading to displacement of 175 Palestinians, including 70 children. These moves align with broader efforts to entrench control over the West Bank, including last month's decision by Israeli Knesset to adopt a non-binding and symbolic motion calling for the application of Israeli sovereignty across all settlements in the occupied West Bank. Alongside these developments, the Palestinian Authority continues to face an unprecedented economic crisis. According to the Palestinian Authority, since May of this year, Israel has not transferred any clearance revenue collected on behalf of the Palestinian Authority. Overall, more than $2 billion US dollars of Palestinian clearance revenues is withheld by Israel. The correspondent banking relationship with Israel is under constant threat, and accumulation of excess shekel in Palestinian banks has escalated into a systemic crisis. All this presents a grave threat to the Palestinian economy and banking system. If left unattended, it could threaten the viability of the Palestinian Authority. Mr. President, the developments I have described are taking place in a volatile regional context with violence and tensions continuing to plague the Middle East. This week alone saw another exchange of fire between the Houthis in Yemen and Israel, continued Israeli strikes in Lebanon, and IDF incursions in Syria. I welcome ongoing diplomatic efforts to de-escalate tensions and urge implementation of all relevant UN resolutions and existing agreements. Mr. President, this alarming picture compels us to act with determination to reverse the present trajectory, starting with the ceasefire and the release of all hostages. What is needed now is a bold action to resolve the conflict, end the occupation, and re-establish a political horizon. In this regard, I welcome the convening of the high-level conference on the implementation of two-state solution, co-chaired by France and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. The message from the international community is clear. The two-state solution remains the only viable path towards just and lasting resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We must work collectively now to advance practical steps, including through our engagement at the upcoming UN General Assembly High-Level Week in September. With Gaza immersed in a situation so horrendous that it defies basic humanity, and with the West Bank facing genuine threats to its long-term existence, we can no longer wait. I thank you for your attention, Mr. President.
Agradezco al señor Alakbarov la información.